to record now.
All right. So as Jane said, money is taboo. I feel like in the workplace, it really is a topic that we don't really talk about a lot or at all. Our coworkers and managers rarely, if ever, discuss salaries and what future compensations may look like for us. And even education about how to handle money topics in the workplace is very scarce. And men typically tend to talk about money more openly and are more comfortable compared to women. So I hope that with some of the perspectives that I'll share today with you, you will feel a little bit more confident and more empowered to bring this up and make sure that this important part of how you work and how you get compensated for your work is addressed and meets your expectations or even exceeds your expectations. So some stats that I want to share with you, and these numbers vary from source to source, but the general idea I'm sure that you've heard before, women earn less than men, and the wage gap between men and women is even more prominent if you're a woman of color. And if we look at the time span of women in the works space and the years that we kind of stay employed, the current wage gap would translate into at least 500,000 or more of earning power that we are losing compared to white men. And about a third of women are uncomfortable negotiating salary, which is of course what determines our our wage when we're employed and our potential for higher wages in the future. I was surprised that it's only about a third of women. I kind of felt that there would be more women who are uncomfortable negotiating, but I hope that overall that number decreases with more education. So the gender wage gap, you can look at the source yourself, but as you can see, women of color tend to earn less than white men compared to white women or Asian women. So that kind of, those gaps are really real. And if we look at the earnings that we have, assuming 40 years of employment, the light blue bar is what the size of the gap that you would experience kind of in terms of your lifetime earnings and what you're leaving on the table if you're not negotiating successfully, or even if you are negotiating successfully and not necessarily getting a fair market salary. So I feel that these kinds of data are important to discuss and make us feel more empowered and more brave to have questions about salaries and negotiations and have those conversations with the teams that are hiring us or the managers at places where we're currently working. So I want to make money a topic that is not taboo, and specifically money in the workplace. And I'll share with you some observations that I hope will inspire a little bit more confidence, provide you some insight into how a company or hiring manager may think about salaries so that you are more informed, and then put you in a place where you feel that you are more in charge of this important area of your professional experience. So I'll talk about a few different areas. And so first I'll share some kind of work and money basics that I did not really know or was aware of before I became a hiring manager. So just some perspectives for you to keep in mind. It will help you think about salaries, I think, in a slightly different or fresh way. I'll talk about money questions and money situations in 3 job search experiences. So if you're looking for a job, or if you're negotiating an offer, and then if you're currently employed and you are asking for a raise. And I've received some kind of frequently asked questions that fall under each of these scenarios. So I hope to address some questions that you might have in your mind right now. If I don't address your question by the time I'm done sharing with you my perspectives, feel free to jot those questions down, and definitely we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. I have to say a disclaimer, I'm currently employed at Chai-Wan. The perspectives I'm sharing here are not representative of my company. The practices that I discuss may or may not be practices that used at Chai-Wan. What I'm sharing here with you is my experience, not just as a hiring manager. at my current company, but as well as a friend and a colleague to other people who have gone on to get positions at large companies and how they went through negotiation. It's also a lot of insight that I learned from a head of HR at IBM who was helping a family member figure out his tactics of asking for a salary adjustment and kind of promotion path. And the perspectives that I learned from her were very influential in some of the insights that I'll share here with you. So use the advice that I share here at your own discretion. You will know all the factors that go into your specific situation. So with that in mind, let's move forward. So first we'll talk about just some of the work and money basics and kind of how salaries are determined and the types of work that there are so that we are aligned on terminology and some of the content that companies consider when they start hiring employees. So first, I'll just start with the fact that there are different types of work that we tend to hear about: full-time, contract, and freelance work. So full-time, you are an employee of the company and you receive benefits from the company and you work just for that company, 40 hours a week. That's typically the most type of employment that there exists. And most of my presentation today focuses around full-time employment situations. Contract employment, and very often contract and freelance employment is kind of what I lump them together. It means you have a contract with an organization to come and do a specific type of work for them for a duration of time. And when you are a contract employee, you will not receive any benefits from the organization. You only have to deliver certain types of work that you have contractually agreed to deliver to the company. There are instances where you are an employee of a company that then has a contract with another institution, and your employer and another institution have a contract for you to go and work at that third-party institution. So some recruiting agencies operate in that type of model where they mean contract. But for the purposes of the presentation here, I'm lumping contract and freelance employment as a single umbrella. And it is legal for an organization to treat full-time and contract or freelance employees differently. So when you have a full-time employee, the company has to pay all sorts of taxes to the state and federal government, such as Medicaid and Medicare and unemployment taxes. Anybody who is a contract employee for an organization, the company hiring them does not have to pay those taxes to the federal government, but that responsibility falls on the person who is contracting with an organization to work for them. So because IRS sets these kind of requirements and guidelines, the companies who employ both full-time and contract employees make it a very big point to not treat contract employees as full-time employees, right? Because they don't want to be paying taxes on those contract employees. And so these kind of full-time and contract and freelance hires are treated differently, and it is legal, even though it doesn't feel nice sometimes that you're not invited to company events if you're a contract employee. There's a reason for it. So full-time contract and freelance payment and benefits that persons employed in that kind of arrangement are different. So as a full-time employee, if I convert my base salary to an hourly rate, that hourly rate will be lower than what I could get if I am a freelance or contract employee. And that is because contract and freelance employees, again, are expected to pay all of their own employment taxes to the state and federal government. Additionally, full-time employees receive benefits such as health insurance, retirement savings, etc., whereas contract and freelance employees do not receive any of those benefits, right? So those kind of expenses come out of their own pocket of whatever they earned. And for that reason, full-time hourly kind of base salary is typically lower than the contract or freelance hourly rate. So to offset the benefits and the lack of benefits. So I'll talk mostly about full-time employment throughout the presentation, but where it's relevant, I will touch on freelance and contract employment and what you may watch out for, and kind of what are some of the red flags or some of the things that you may need to be aware of. But I'll focus primarily on the full-time kind of positions. So if you are a full-time, if you're a company that hires full-time employees, as a company, you will establish salary bands for each group of roles. And each group of role would be, for instance, a design team. What does it mean for somebody to be a junior designer, a senior designer, a lead designer, a head of design, you know, a head of UX for the company? So that would be one group. Another group could be HR team and anybody supporting in the HR team. You could have different levels of admins and benefits coordinators and head of HR, manager of HR, etc. So those are different groups. And so organizations look at the different groups that they employ, and they establish salary bands that determine if you are, let's say, a junior level designer, your salary will fall between this number and that number, somewhere in that band. And I will show you what that looks like visually in just a moment. These salary bands are reviewed by HR regularly to compare to look at what's going on in the market. How are other companies treating their employees? How are they getting compensated? Is this skill that we hire getting more rare, or is it getting commoditized? So everybody can do this, what we're looking for. And based on a lot of these kind of data, HR teams may adjust the bands, may say, you know, our employees are underpaid or overpaid, and make adjustments for the coming years. And they should be doing this exercise about once a year. It's very exhausting to complete a salary band review. And I'll show you kind of how that plays out a little bit. But companies should be doing this. Another thing that I want to call out is that hiring an employee costs more than just the base salary. And as individuals and professionals who are on the market looking for a job, we tend to focus heavily on the base salary. But so I want you to have in your minds the perspective that if I am looking to hire you for $100 as a full-time employee, I will end up paying in terms of salary and all of the additional benefits, $125 or $140. And I am making that commitment to pay you and to pay the government for a long time in the future, because I expect that you will be employed with an organization for quite a while. So as a company, I have to plan my budget in a way that accommodates not just your base salary, but all the additional costs that I will incur in having you as my employee. And I feel like 25 to 40% is kind of a big chunk of cash, right? So it's not just the base salary, but everything else that comes with it. And that's why the compensation package is really important. And I really want to highlight that the compensation package, it's not just your base salary, but everything else that comes with it. So the health, the dental insurance, short-term disability, long-term disability, retirement savings plans like 401k, health savings account that the company may contribute to, companies match to your 401k if they offer that, bring your own device policies, and any stock options that you get, any bonuses, pay time off, any of the above, and any of the combination of the above is what a full compensation package could include. And the companies, depending on their needs for financial planning, et cetera, will decide what is the base salary, how much is the PTO, how do we structure the bonus, what is our retirement plan, et cetera, because all of these pieces of the compensation package have their own additional costs that the company has to bear. So for instance, if the company says, I really do not want to be paying X amount of unemployment tax, you know, they will offer you maybe a lower base salary, but then they offset that lower base salary with additional PTO or certain types of bonuses that are taxed at a different rate for IRS purposes. So just sharing a little bit of those perspectives, because again, companies have to plan their finances for quite a while. And when a decision comes as to what offer a company makes to you, it's not about you as a person. But it's really about how they as an organization are going to manage money long-term. So I want to show you an example of salary bands. I just stole it from the internet. So excuse the not very beautiful and somewhat dated table design. So on the left side of the chart, we have career bands. So operational, technical, professional, management teams belong to different roles. And you can see that their salaries would begin at different levels. So for instance, the operational team, 01, they start at a pay grade 20, and their pay grade can increase only to pay grade 23, which would be the highest level that you would ever become at an organization if you are within the operational role. But if you are in management, kind of in the pink column, your salary would start at the pay grade 25, and there are 5 levels that you can professionally grow in within the management role, and that you can max out in the management position at a pay grade of 29. And you can see the corresponding dollar amounts for salary ranges shown on the right. So if you are in the operational entry-level position and you're starting at pay grade 20, your salary would range anywhere between 22,500 to 35,900. So your offer would be made somewhere in that range. If you are in management 1, entry-level manager, first year manager, whatever, your salary would begin at 40,000 and then go up to a certain value that I cannot see because of the video stream. So one thing that I want to call your attention to is the salary bands are fairly broad and the salary bands overlap. So if you're looking at pay grades 20 and 21, so at level 01, an operational team, entry-level person, I can make, $30,000 and I will be in that pay grade of 20. But even if I'm promoted to operational level 2 and my pay grade moves to pay grade 21, that $30,000 that I was making as the entry-level professional, I can still be making even if I am promoted. So what I want to call your attention to is that an change in your title indicating vertical move within your role does not always lead to a salary increase. Companies will try to promote you and to increase your salary, but it doesn't mean that a promotion is always equal to a salary raise. One other thing that I want to point out before I forget, as we get into additional topics. So when you have seen companies try to land you around the midpoint of the salary band. And the idea is that every appraisal cycle, when there's performance evaluation, etc., they would adjust your salary and increase your salary to compensate for the work that you've done and to show, that you are growing professionally by, kind of increasing what you're earning. But they want to give themselves a bit of a room, kind of how many increases they can make without having you jump to the next pay grade until you are qualified to be earning in that higher pay grade that's to follow. In some instances, you may be kind of landing an offer in the lower range of the salary band. Additional factors influence it, how hot is the market in terms of talent, how difficult is it to find somebody for a specific role that the company is trying to fill, etc. But just keep in mind that typically when you get an offer, you're not at the top of the pay, at the salary band, because the company wants to have some wiggle room in which to grow you financially without a promotion. And the final point on the role of the hiring manager, which is a role that I perform at our company. And I've verified this with several other professionals as well. So the hiring manager does not determine what your offer would be or what your pay is, but they can influence that. And I'll speak to that through some examples as we go along. And the hiring manager is usually not involved in negotiations, and the HR team handles that conversation. So the hiring manager will see the offer letter when the offer is being made to a candidate, but any of the discussion between I want more PTO, I want a higher salary, I want a sign-on bonus. That is left for the HR team and the candidate to kind of hash out. And again, the HR team has very close connection with the finance team that manages the company's finances, and any decision that gets made in terms of, okay, we're going to pay you a bonus, we're going to increase your salary, those decisions are, at the end of the day, financial decisions. And so those teams have to make the choices. And that's why the hiring manager is typically not involved in negotiations. All right, so now let's talk about what happens and when money comes up when we are looking for a job. So my first piece of advice is for you to decide what you want and what you actually need, and do a little bit of homework. So look at the skills and experience you bring to the table and you want to bring to your role. And as you're looking at different jobs and all of the salary resources that I'll share with you in just the next moment, evaluate your skills and your experience, and also look at the job role and responsibilities that you would be performing at a company. So don't just look at a title when you're doing your wage searches. So a user researcher in one organization will be doing very different things than a user researcher at another organization. Design manager at Google does very different things than design manager at ExxonMobil, due to size of the organization, due to what industry the organization is in, also due to the way that the organizations are structured. So look at what people are doing in terms of their roles and responsibilities, not just the titles. So how do you figure out, you're applying for a position in one company, and how do you figure out kind of what the wages are for that role and what the responsibilities are? So you can look at the job postings that are available on the internet, and in many cases, they may not be available if they don't have any openings. And then you can look at a lot of different resources. So Indeed, LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, and again, I'll share that list with you in just a minute. They will have approximate salaries for the different roles that the company typically hires. And from all these different sources of data, you should have an idea of a range within your salary and within which your skills, experience, and your desired salary may fit for a specific role within a specific organization. When you're doing your homework, I also encourage you to look at the location of an organization where you might want to be employed. So for instance, Google has to pay high salaries for employees that are working in California, just because the cost of living in California is extremely high. And those kind of salaries are definitely not competitive with salaries here in Houston, Texas, because our cost of living is very, very different. So keep in mind the location as well as you're doing your homework. Also, I will encourage you to evaluate companies of different sizes, of different types, and the industry in which they operate. Large companies tend to be able to pay higher salaries to their employees compared to smaller companies. So when you pull all of these pieces of information together and you're trying to determine what you want and what you need for your next role, you will create a range of 80,000 to 100,000 or 80,000 to 120,000 as your desired range within which you want your next position to fall. And again, a lot of these different factors will influence where, maybe for some organizations, you will say your preferred range is, within 100 to 120. For other organizations, it's within 80 to 90. But you will at least kind of know what you might expect and what is normal for a company size, location, industry, a job with specific roles and responsibilities. So many places where you can do the research on the salaries for UX professionals. Again, that's available on the slide share that Jane shared. And there are a few other resources that should be linked at the very end of the document as well. And my go-to sanity check salary calculator for UX professionals is actually on measuringusability.com website. So the reference is here at the bottom of a slide. And I just pulled a screenshot of this calculator. So there you input your employment status, whether the company is for profit, not for profit, how many years of UX experience you have, how large is the company, etc. And where in the US you live. And the calculator will tell you what your predicted salary is, kind of a ballpark number, and kind of what the lower and upper bands for that salary range might be. So I find, based on everything that I have seen, that this is a fairly good approximation of what you might expect for your role. This does not specify I'm a UX designer, UX researcher, content creator, or anything of that sort. It is a UX professional, and it does look at employment level, whether you're an entry level or supervisor, etc. But again, this is kind of a good litmus test based on everything that I have seen from a variety of resources over the last several years. There's a 2016 version. The most recent one is 2018. And I believe they look at UXPA data, salary data, when it's available by the UXPA organization. All right, so I think you should do your homework about what salary range you need to fall into before you start applying for jobs, or very early when you start applying for jobs, because someone will ask you. Sometimes they will ask you very early in the interview process. The recruiter will call you, kind of vet you for your technical skills and verify that what you put on a resume is legit. And they will say, okay, what's your typical expectation? If you don't have your number, you might not proceed in the interview process. So know your numbers. Have a range. You don't have to commit to a specific number. I definitely encourage you to have a range because it gives you more negotiating power when you get an offer. You can have that range a little bit broader. You should absolutely know your minimum for yourself. You don't necessarily have to share that with a recruiter. But if you have done your homework, you will know that you are paid fairly at the specific cutoff point, right? And you also may have additional obligations at home and personally, where you say, I absolutely have to make 50, 60, 70, 80, whatever it is that you need to support yourself and your other obligations. If you are looking for full-time employment, but you're also open for contract employment, such as a couple weeks here, maybe as a couple months, if nothing lands in terms of full-time work, know what you would like to be paid as a contract employee, but do not share those options up front if full-time employment is your goal. If you want to be employed on contract and that works with your lifestyle, that's totally up to you, and you can look for those kind of opportunities and communicate that to your recruiter. But if you are looking for full-time employment, know your rates, know whether that's something that you would be interested in, but again, do not share that upfront. So I think it's very important for you to know your numbers and have a range in mind, because when those type how early in the interview process they will come up, you will be more prepared, and then you don't have to scramble, right? And that having a range will help you make more informed decisions when you are negotiating an offer that you receive. So I'm all for being prepared. So some of the frequently asked questions that I've heard from my colleagues and some of my peers and mentees. So if somebody asks you, what do I make currently? What if I'm not employed or I haven't been employed for a while? Or, all the employment that I have really was kind of not paying me what I feel like my market value should be. So in some states, asking for your current income is allowed. In some states, it is not allowed. And my advice would be, and this is corroborated by my HR team, is that if people ask you, what do you make currently? You don't have to give them a number. You can say, I am paid fairly for the work that I'm doing, and I expect that you will pay me fairly and my market rate if you decide to make me an offer. Or you can say something like, this is personal information that I don't share, and is my salary related to the salary for this position? Because they shouldn't be, right? You're being hired to do work with specific roles and responsibilities, having specific skills. Right? So what you currently make should have no influence into what you should be paid in your new position. So having these kind of statements prepared and anticipating this kind of question, I think will make you more comfortable and confident if and when this question comes up in your conversations. Another question that sometimes I get asked, especially by more junior professionals that I talk to, what if I just really need a job? I don't care about salary. I'm sure they're going to pay me, more than minimum wage. I just need any sort of employment. I empathize with that situation. And what I'm sharing with you is more kind of pre-COVID, pre-recession highlights of making life choices. So I don't know what it's like to be out of a job and really scrambling to stay, in your home and have your lights on and all of that. If you really just need a job, you go and do the best that you can with what you've got. If you are in a position where you can negotiate and consider different options, I will encourage you not to tell the recruiter what your absolute minimum is. And I will encourage you not to tell your life story to a recruiter or to a hiring manager. I have had some experiences where the candidate says, I really need to be employed. I have all these obligations, et cetera, et cetera. And as a hiring manager, I am in a position where I'm debating whether I'm considering the candidate for employment because I feel sad and, I want to help them out as a human being, or because I feel that they would be a good fit for the company and be successful in their role after I hire them. And I don't ever want to be in a position where I bring somebody on a team and don't feel 100% confident that they could be successful in what they do. So I would encourage you not to share your life stories with recruiters and hiring managers because that does not help in the job search process, especially where money is concerned. And if you really need a job and you are very focused on getting a full-time employment position, do consider contract opportunities and some sort of freelance arrangement that allows you to still continuously look for full-time employment. Now, another question that comes up, what if I give them a range and my range is too big, or my single number that I drop on the table is too big? What do I do with that? So if your expectations are way above the salary range per position, you might be disqualified from an interview process. I've had candidates that ask me for a salary that's higher than our VP of operations salary. And that's for kind of more of an entry-level position. And at that point, it's just a no-go. And I have more of those kind of conversations than I would like to, but that's the reality. And some of these candidates are from the East or the West Coast, where they expect a higher salary because the cost of living in those areas is too large. I've also had candidates who say, well, at this large organization, I make X amount. So when I come to work at your smaller company, I expect to make this amount plus more because I'm moving up professionally. It doesn't exactly work like that because, again, as I said, smaller companies tend to pay lower salaries than very large companies. And it also depends on your industry and what your company does. So do your research and have maybe some more realistic numbers for the location, for the job title, for the company size, etc. My recommendation would be if you present a range, and if you are really interested in a company, even if it's a smaller company, you can say, this is my range. And if my range is above what you think this position would merit, I would still love to have a conversation with you so we can learn about each other and see if we're a good fit. And I'm interested in exploring a full compensation package and see, how we could meet some of my expectations. And if you continue to have a conversation with a company and they do make you an offer, maybe the benefits will be so outstanding that you will say, you know what, I will take a lower base salary. So, but do keep in mind that if your number is way above and beyond anything, that might disqualify you. So from the manager's perspective, I don't ask salary questions. Our HR teams handles that, again, because it's related to the company's financial planning. I do get to know about salary expectations if we're deciding to make an offer to the candidate. And some of the questions that go through my head are, can we afford this candidate? And does this candidate have reasonable and realistic expectations? So again, if I have somebody who works at Google and they want to come to join Chai1 and they are expecting their salary to increase because they have this Google experience and we're here in Houston, Texas, our numbers completely don't match, right? And even if they decrease their expectations, my thought process is this person really going to stay with us, or are they going to jump ship when something better comes up on the horizon because they expect really, really high reward financially? So that's the perspective. So let's say you continue with your conversation with a recruiter, with a hiring team, and you got an offer. So how do we negotiate? So yay, that's a very good place to be in, to have an offer in your hands or in your inbox. So first thing, always take time to review the offer. Typically the offer is extended through a phone call. The hiring manager and the recruiter, or the recruiter, will say, we're excited to invite you to join our team. They should walk you through some of the highlights of the offer. And please, please, please always take time to review the offer so that you don't accept the position kind of just feeling on the high. There are things that you need to look out for in the offer, and that's why it's so important to look at it in writing. And I'll share that with you in just a minute. So be mindful of the timeline that you need to follow to make a decision. So some companies will say, you have 5 days to get back to us. Some companies will say, I need your response within 24 hours. So be mindful of what that is and respond in a timely manner, and negotiate if you need more time to respond to it. And I'll touch on that in a minute. The most important takeaway from this whole presentation is negotiate. Always, 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 always negotiate. And I'll say that again probably later. Everything is up for negotiation. So please, please do. When you have an offer, again, this is kind of more full-time employment situation. Think for yourself, what are the must-haves and what are the nice-to-haves? So maybe you absolutely need to have 4 weeks of vacation each year because you do a family thing and you travel and this and that. And maybe certain types of benefits such as insurance, you can treat them as nice to have because your spouse or your partner has insurance and you can be on their plan, right? So figure out what you absolutely need as deal breakers and what things you can do without. You rarely get everything that you want. And if you do, kudos to you. Be open to options that may not be base salary increases, because as I talked to you before, the base salary determines how much tax the company has to pay. And sometimes the company doesn't want to pay as much tax as they should or could. And instead they compensate that with other ways to of rewarding their employees. So consider, is it extra time off? Is it additional bonus that you might get after signing or after good performance that's reviewed 3 months out, etc. There are many other things that you could consider. And in some instances, you may have a first year, you can work every other Friday, or you can take every other Friday off, like flexible work arrangements. And those types of special benefits may have an expiration date. So you need to be mindful of that. So when you get a phone call saying we want to make you an offer, you stay very positive. You say, I'm so excited to hear this. I would love to review the offer in writing and I will get back to you very soon. I just need to kind of look at it and digest. And you continue to project a positive attitude, even if you're going to negotiate. And of course, you have to always, always negotiate. I'm going to pivot a little bit and talk about contract and freelance offers. So if a company calls you and says, I have something for you, I want to just raise a few things to be mindful of. Make sure that your offer has very clear scope of work. So you know exactly what you are delivering. Is it wireframes? How many wireframes? Wireframes of what? How long are you going to work? everything has to be delivered by a specific deadline. What format is it delivered in? Is it comps? Are you responsible for content? Are you responsible for a report? Are you handing this over in, InVision, in Zeppelin, in Azure, and some other Adobe XD? Like, all of those details need to be very clearly defined so that there's no confusion for you and for the company as to what you're delivering. Look at the cancellation clause in the contract. How soon do you need to give them a heads up that you need to pull out? How soon can they drop the contract with you and pull out? So like if the company says, we can cancel at any point in time, well, that doesn't give you a lot of protection, and that's not a good position to be in, right? You need to pay your bills. So what's a cancellation clause? Whose equipment and software will you be using? This might be spelled out in a contract. This may be discussed offline, but that's one point that a lot of contractors do not clarify. So for instance, our company does not provide any equipment nor software to contract employees, and we expect them to have laptops and any software that they need to use to do their work. But some contractors never bring this question up, and then they are in a difficult situation when they need to purchase licenses for software that they didn't really have. Understand the invoicing and payment schedule and the time tracking expectations. So are you invoicing the company every day, every week, every month? How soon is the company going to pay you? Within 2 weeks, a month out, etc.? Do you have to report your time, or is the time entered just on an invoice that you submit? So these kinds of things should be clarified in your offer. And if they're not, you need to ask for them. And finally, review the NDA. NDA is the non-disclosure agreement, which says that you will not reveal any information about the product or the projects that you're working on to outside parties. I don't think that NDA is really negotiable. It is a typical agreement that companies have with many different parties, but at least you should be familiar with what specifically does the company's NDA spell out. And also, I would just say this is discussed not on an offer, but questions that you should definitely ask are, what's the onboarding process? If I join as a contractor, how do I get to know what I'm working on? Who are my points of contact? What channels of communication exist? What systems am I using? What access do I have to materials, information, etc.? What's the cadence of checking in with the team and so on? Who's approving my work? Who's reviewing my work? All of those things. So this is more contract and freelance. Now, the red flags, both for full-time and for contract freelance offers are listed here. It's probably not an exhaustive list, but some of the key points that I discussed with my team in HR. So if contract is very broad, not detailed, lacks explicit standard items, such as your benefits are, you get so many days of vacation, you're reporting to this person, you get paid every 2 weeks, here's your monthly or bi-weekly salary, etc. Those kind of things are red flags. Again, not having clear scope of work. If you're a freelance contractor, that's something to watch out for. If there are no details about benefits, but the company has mentioned benefits before, that's a red flag. If there are probation or cancellation clauses that are generous to the company, so for instance, if the company says, your performance will be evaluated after 60 days, and we can fire you after those 60 days or what have you, that would be kind of a red flag. Probation, I've not seen probation clauses discussed in an offer letter, but that's something that may be discussed in kind of like, at our company, here's kind of how our hiring goes, and there is a kind of standard review process that happens. Cancellation here refers specifically to contract. So again, if a company says, I can cancel my contract with you with notice of a day, that's very generous to the company and not generous to you. So I would negotiate to have that changed. An absolute red flag if a recruiter is asking you to make a decision on the spot, whether it's a contract or a full-time offer. You should not have to make a decision on the spot. You should want to see the written offer. Again, so that you know that everything that you expect is listed there. And a potential red flag, and that's why I flagged it with an asterisk, is if it's a tight timeline for you to decide. So the company says, I need 24, I need you to respond within 24, 48, 72 hours. That might feel tight. Some people argue that that's a mean thing to do to a candidate, because a candidate may be interviewing in many places and they may be expecting a couple different offers so that they can kind of negotiate with the power of more than one offer. The perspective of a hiring company is that sometimes the company really needs a person to start because, for instance, they have a project that requires a resource to get going, and they do not have the luxury to wait for another candidate. Or they have two candidates, and the second candidate to receive an offer may have another offer as well. So the company has a hard time maintaining that second candidate potentially interested, right? So there are some decisions that the company has to make, and that could influence how short of a timeline exists for you to make a decision. But you should always have a little bit of time to look at the written offer. So one area that I was asked a lot about is, there are a lot of promises that can be made in the interview negotiation process. How do I keep my team accountable for the promises that were made? So I highly recommend that you ask questions during the interview and the negotiation process. And I've listed some examples here, like what's the average time to promotion? How often do people get a bonus? What portion of people do get a bonus? If that's something that's made an offer, that's added to the offer letter for me. And I want you to ask these questions because it will help you be a little bit more informed. But do keep in mind that some items that are discussed in the interviewing and negotiation process will never make it into the written offer or contract. So you can follow up on these topics via email if you feel like that's useful. And what I would recommend is that once you accept an offer and you join the company, then you continue those conversations with your hiring manager and document those conversations. Whether or not those types of conversations are not legally binding, right? So if worse comes to worse and you get into a fight, there could be fallout. And even if you have stuff in email documented, it's a piece of evidence to point to that these topics were discussed, but it doesn't mean that the company is legally obligated to make anything happen for you. So just something to keep in mind. You have good faith in other people, right? That's kind of what it comes down to. And usually that pays off, but just being super transparent about how that works. So questions that come up kind of for this negotiation experience. So will you retract the offer if I negotiate? I would say any good company should not retract an offer. That would be a red flag. If the company says, oh, you asked for more, the offer is off the table, I would say, okay, good riddance. So it takes a lot of time and a lot of work to hire somebody. So if we got to a point where we are making an offer to you, keep in mind that we have invested a lot of our time to get to that point, right? We've had more than one interview. Multiple people have had interviews with you. We've talked to multiple candidates, very likely. So if we are making you an offer, it means we want you at the company. So if you receive an offer and you say, I would like to have a conversation about this, I would like to negotiate a little bit, it's unlikely that anybody is going to say, oh, no, forget it. So keep in mind the time element. Time is important. So if you take a very long time to negotiate, the company could be concerned about the second best candidate and the fact that at the end of the day, you might decide to walk away and the second best candidate will disappear off the job market. Right? So there's a little bit of tension that the hiring team feels when candidates negotiate for a while. Also, just so that you know, from a purely legal perspective, let's say I make you an offer for $100,000 and you come back and say, no, I would like 120. And I don't make a response to your 120. As soon as you said, no, I would like 120, the initial offer of 100 is off the table, unless I re-offer that back to you. So if you say 120 and I disappear off the radar, I'm not legally bound in any way, shape, or form to respond to you. So just wanted to make sure that from a purely legal perspective, that is how companies think about negotiation. Hopefully that doesn't happen, and it shouldn't happen. Again, the company is interested in you in making an offer, but as soon as you make a counter offer, it negates the initial offer. The company can come back and say, we hear 120, but we cannot do 120. We can do 100. We can give you something else in addition. Then your 120 offer is, or counter offer is negated. Another question that I get asked is, do you make an offer to more than one candidate at once? And the answer is no, unless we have more than one position open for that role. So typically an offer goes out to one candidate, and until we hear back from that candidate, we would not be making an offer to somebody else. But again, keep in mind that sometimes the clock is ticking, and if you're taking quite a while to make a decision and you haven't responded to our offer, or we have not responded to your offer, we may be having second thoughts. So what if the offer is exactly what I asked for? I will say ask for more. Negotiate. Like, negotiate. There's always the need to negotiate. What I didn't put in here is that companies, when they make an offer to a candidate, typically they prepare for a candidate to negotiate, and they will have a little bit of wiggle room within the salary band, or with a little bit of extra PTO, or a sign-on bonus, or something that they can offer back when you ask for more. I don't know what that more is, but always negotiate. You can say, oh, this is really great. This is really nice. Can you add, maybe 5,000 more onto this? Like that would really make it work for me. Or can you give me a little bit more vacation? So ask for more. What if you're waiting to hear back from another company? So you can ask your recruiter to give you a few more days to make a decision. Sometimes you may want to say, look, I'm waiting to hear back from another company. I'm really torn. I'm excited about you, but also I really want to make sure that I'm making the best choice. Reach out to the other company and tell them that you have an offer already. And so maybe that company will get their ducks in a row faster and get back to you. It could be that you come to a point where the other company is taking a long time and you have a single offer in your hand and you need to make a decision. That is your call. But do keep these companies informed about the fact that you have another offer. What if I have two offers? Well, yay to you. You're in high demand. That's a good position to be in. You can tell each company, like, I have a really great offer from another company. This is the base that they're offering. My total compensation package is worth X amount. The companies might ask to see the offer letters to believe your numbers. Keep in mind that at some point, you will have to make a decision as to what's most important to you, whether that's base salary or benefits or a combination of one or the other. But at this point, you are sharing information about kind of what your offers are, so the companies can make informed decisions whether they can or cannot afford you. So a couple of perspectives from a manager's point of view. So again, the manager is not involved in negotiation. Managers sometimes informed about the negotiation, or at least the outcome of the negotiation when the person accepts the offer. So there could be formal and informal offers. So I had one instance where a candidate said, my absolute minimum is this amount, and it was at the very, very high end of the salary band. And we found a way to say, okay, I can hire you at this base salary. I absolutely have no room and no approval to give you anything else but your base salary that you desire, plus the traditional standard benefits. So do you want me to make you a formal offer or not? And the candidate can say, yes, that works for me, or no, that doesn't work for me. So there could be some conversations that are not documented, but you are talking about base salaries. Also, if in our negotiation process or this discussion about informal and formal offers kind of, it transpires that you are very motivated by, I would think, how soon are you going to jump ship if you are negotiating so aggressively? I had one candidate who was super stuck on specific sets of numbers, and we kind of came to an impasse, and I said, I don't feel well bringing you on because I feel like you will jump ship very soon when something better comes along. And we did not make an offer to that candidate. So negotiate for sure, know what your must-haves are and what your nice-to-haves are. All right, and our final topic in terms of employment, and then we can look at all your Q&A. I see the chat moving along. So how do you ask for a raise once you are employed? So first, I'll invite you to do a little bit of a self-awareness check, because sometimes I think we professionally experience a situation where like, oh, am I paid well? I do so much work, nobody recognizes me, I'm underpaid. So here I invite you to do a self-awareness check. Are you paid well? Go look at the market salary rates, do a little bit of homework that I pointed you to at the very beginning of the presentation. Look at job roles and responsibilities, company size, location where you live, all of that good stuff. You may also feel like you are ready for promotion. And I will ask you, does your manager agree with how you're feeling? And if your manager does not agree, that's a big area for improvement and alignment that you need to pursue. So ask for clear promotion guidelines from your manager, what accomplishments you need to demonstrate for you to qualify for a promotion within your company. Document all of the successes that you have and regularly check in with your manager about your progress. So you and your manager need to create a plan for you to be promoted. Your manager is a significant person in your promotion and upward movement within your company. If your manager does not think that you're ready for promotion, if your manager does not feel like you meet expectations for the next role, your promotion will be difficult to achieve. And I highlight here that you are the person who is responsible for your promotion. Even though your manager has an important role in whether or not you get promoted, it is your job to understand what your manager's expectations are, how you can document, and how you can show that you are ready to be promoted. There could be disagreement about that, and I'll touch on those points a little bit later. But you are the person who should be talking about this, who should be tracking your progress, who should be checking in with your manager, and documenting all of that. A lot of employees tend to think that they brought up promotion once. They work really hard for the next half year or a year, and they come back to their performance appraisal and they say, well, are you promoting me again? It's like, we haven't talked about your promotion for a year. Everything that you have done is great, but that does not qualify you for promotion because you did the wrong things. So own your promotion, check in with your manager regularly. So recruiting and hiring is very costly, and smart companies focus on retention, and there's many different strategies that companies pursue to retain employees. So research your salary in the market, focusing on responsibilities. Ask your manager or ask your HR team where you are within the company's salary band for your current role. You can determine if you're paid market or you are underpaid. Ask about the likelihood of a raise that you might get, what the promotion path looks like, what the timeline for your promotion might be. I highly recommend that you have these conversations first with your manager and then with HR if you feel like you need to. And as I said earlier, document your contributions, your accomplishments, anything that aligns with your manager's expectations to recommend you for a promotion, and anything that aligns with a job description for the role into which you're trying to be promoted. So decide on your options before you ask for a raise or you ask for a promotion. This typically applies for if you are not in an appraisal cycle, or even if you are within an appraisal cycle, but you don't expect your manager to give you a raise, to approve your raise or approve your promotion. Decide how much you want to battle it and whether you do eventually want to leave the organization and kind of how you might want to handle that. So if you ask for a raise or for a promotion outside of a typical review cycle, you should have the request to your manager, then document that and any related conversations. So for instance, you have a very successful project that you just performed. The company earned a lot of accolades from everybody else about that project. And you're asking your manager, hey, I am underpaid looking at my salary band. Here's the market rate. I kindly request a raise of $2,000 to my base salary. You could have that conversation in the middle of the year without waiting for an appraisal cycle if it is really, really important to you. And when you make that request, document it in any related conversations. Think about what you will do if the manager and the company says no. And of course, I'm sure you will celebrate if the manager and the company say yes. I also touched on this point as well, that a promotion may or may not give you a raise. So assuming that you and your manager said your plan for your promotion in place, you have been checking off all the boxes, you've been tracking your accomplishments, you got your promotion, depending on where you are in the salary band and depending on the salary band for the higher role, you may or may not get a raise financially. Companies try to do both, but it doesn't always happen. A raise is typically a salary adjustment. Other benefits are usually off the table. So it's unlikely that you can say, oh, since you promoted me, I want to get extra PTO, unless that's company's broad policy that people in that specific role get additional benefits. But typically that is not negotiable. Although, especially for higher level positions, your additional benefits could be how your compensation, like part of your compensation has, company stock, or your bonus structure becomes different if you reach a certain level. So as I already hinted at, your manager plays an important role in your promotion. The manager may be an advocate for your promotion, or your manager may be extremely disengaged and not care about it. So I'll talk a little bit about how to handle that in a minute. But what I want you to do, what I want to point out is that there are many other factors that have nothing to do with you and also nothing to do with the manager, which determine whether or not you will get a promotion or a raise. For instance, you may not be aware that 15 other people are even more underpaid than you at a company, and they have been on their last thread of patience to stay at the company. So the company may be working very actively to compensate those people and bring them up to the market level. And you, the last person in the request line, might be really at the very bottom of that list of people to financially support and recognize. It could be that there is just no place within the organization structure within which to promote you. So for instance, if everybody all of a sudden becomes a manager, who are they managing, right? The company has to maintain a specific structure for it to operate effectively because different roles have different responsibilities. So a decision to promote or give you a raise may have nothing to do with you as a human being who has done all the excellent work and could be influenced by a lot of other factors. Even things like the company does not have enough cash flow to take on your salary increase and the associated increase in taxes that they have to pay to the state and federal governments. So just sharing that. And when you're moving up within an organization, or even if your performance has been great and you're not promoted, but you have asked for a raise, your raise will typically not exceed 3 to 5%. That is what I heard is the biggest salary adjustment that is not related to a promotion. So when you're moving within a salary band. And it is switching jobs is where you have the biggest salary bump, 15, 20, 30, 40% when you're switching companies. Because again, companies don't really know you very well. They know your resume, how you perform in an interview. And of course, you have the power to negotiate at that point. And as an employee, that power typically is much smaller. So some FAQs, and then we're going to jump into a Q&A. Will I lose my job if I ask for a raise? Typically not. You shouldn't. If a company lets you go, so Texas is an at-will employment state, so they can let you go for no reason at any point in time. So they choose to let you go after you ask for a raise. I mean, that may or may not be related. You should not be let go if you lose. You should not be let go if you ask for a raise. Do keep in mind that, again, when you ask for a raise, and again, it's not the performance appraisal cycle, and you say, I just did an awesome job, I feel like I'm underpaid, can you give me a bit of a bump? You should know what you want to do if the company and your manager say no. Do you want to stay there, or are you going to jump ship? And are you prepared for that? And also, if you handle that conversation professionally and well without throwing an ultimatum, your working relationship, even if you receive the answer no, should still be quite good. But if you enter that kind of discussion in a very combative mode, then it might eventually cause problems for you later on if you stay at the organization. Another situation that comes up sometimes, I have an offer from someone else, but I don't really want to leave my current employer, but their offer is bigger than what I'm currently making. So how do I manage that? I would do it the same way as asking for a raise. I would go talk to my manager and say, hey, somebody approached me. It seemed like an interesting position. So I went through the interview process to learn more and see if I would be a good fit. I have an offer. I don't really want to join them. I don't think that I would be as effective there as I'm here. But their offer is really appealing, and they're offering me $40,000 more than what I make here. Is there anything that we can do to my salary to adjust a little bit and, make me stay? And at that point, you should know what happens if your managers and the company say no to you when you bring that up. But the manager and the HR team and the finance team may be able to work something out. I don't think they would be able to match the $40,000 difference. That's a big chunk of cash that the company didn't plan for. But they might get creative and maybe put some things in place to get your salary adjusted incrementally, or give you some sort of a bonus or something along those lines. So again, if you handle the situation professionally, not combative, you're not throwing ultimatums, and you begin that conversation with your manager before you escalate it to HR or your manager's manager, this conversation could go well. What if I have a poor relationship with my manager and my manager does not care about my salary raise or my promotion or anything else that I do? So, and there's a related question, like my manager does not advocate for my raise. So what I do? So first, have a conversation with your manager, and you as an adult, as a professional, need to own that conversation. What are the expectations for my promotion? What is the expected timeline for my promotion? What exactly do I need to do to demonstrate that I am competent in A, B, C? Document those, have regular check-ins with those. If your manager does not appear to be receptive or interested in any way, shape, or form in these kinds of conversations, you can at that point go to your HR team and bring this up as a concern. I'm trying to grow professionally. My manager seems disengaged, or we seem not to be aligned at all in terms of what I need to do. So HR in that instance could facilitate the conversation between the two of you. They might pull in your manager's manager and figure out where the roadblocks are, and potentially help you kind of navigate that situation. You could reach out to the HR team and ask to talk to them confidently. First, ask, if I share things with you, will that be confident, or would that be done in confidence, or will you share that with my manager? When they say yes, you can have an open conversation with us. We won't report anything to your manager. Then you can ask them, like, how do I handle a situation like this? And then collectively decide how you want to proceed. In some instances, HR does have to report things to the manager, to your manager, if you bring them to the table. So just make sure you kind of get that agreement before you get into the details, if you're not comfortable. And then from the manager's perspective, when somebody asks me, for a raise or for salary adjustment, or what's the path to promotion, et cetera, and really it's more when it's a discussion about a raise, what I begin to think is, are you a retention risk? Are you looking for opportunities outside of our company, and are you going to leave? And if you are, how soon will you leave? And how big the motivators of money are in your life? And also just, again, the perspective of You might be an awesome employee doing really, really great work. And there's a backlog of people who need to be promoted, paid bonuses, because they are also doing a lot of great work that we don't get to see. Or as much as I want to give you a salary raise or a bonus, my hands might be tied. So just a little bit of perspective that what we want to do and what we can do are within constraints. And with that, I have shared a lot and I spoke for more than 45 minutes. So I'll let you jump into the Q&A. I do want to show you very briefly 2 slides where there are a bunch of links to additional sources of salary information. You will fall asleep looking through all of this stuff and you'll say, oh my God, how much is there? And this is just for UX team. So imagine HR team going through all of these sources and combing for, salary bands for user researcher, senior user researcher, lead researcher, manager, et cetera, et cetera. And they have to do that for all the different roles of the company. And then there are some resources for wage gap and negotiating tips. Several of these articles are really, really amazing. Highly recommend you read them because you should always, 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 always ask for more. There we are.
Presentation, Evelina. I'm so glad we're recording this because I feel like this is so full of juicy detail. I have to go back in and listen to it all over again just to catch everything.
So I cannot easily see all the chat messages because my mouse is hidden. Does anyone want to ask their questions if they posted them in the chat?
How have salaries changed during COVID?
That's a good question, and I don't really know the answer to it. I don't think that they have gone down. I think there is a much larger demand for more senior professionals than more junior professionals based on the job postings that I see. But the amount of job postings that I see is very promising. So there are a lot of opportunities. So for those professionals that have more experience, it's nice. Yeah, but it's kind of unfortunate for more junior professionals trying to get into the full-time employment space. And also, COVID just happened, right? I mean, it is several months already, but making salary adjustments and going through that review process is exhausting. So companies would still hire you within a salary band, but they might, for financial reasons and kind of the recession that we're experiencing, they might place you at a lower end of the salary band. So the salaries themselves overall should not have changed very much just yet.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Well, first I want to say it was such a great presentation. I learned a lot. And I know you always post a lot of good articles on Slack, so thank you for that. So I got hired on as a contractor, kind of similar to what you were talking about. And it's not necessarily based on money, but it was interesting that when I was hired, I gave them, my offer, and then they actually was like, I can give you $10 more. And I think it was because that project had a set number, like a set amount for design. So I think what their contract was for. So that's one thing to just kind of like put out there. That being said, there is a possibility of me being hired on full-time or with their company. How typical is it for somebody to potentially want to hire you on and you worked with them for about 4 to 6 months, for them to have you go through the hiring process, the full hiring process with them?
Yeah, that's a very good question because we actually experience the same thing at our company sometimes, and we have hired contract employees into full-time positions. So I'm bummed that I missed that topic because it definitely happens maybe more often than people talk about. So I think it's normal for you to go through a formal interview process because companies typically want to say, we want to make sure that all candidates have an equal chance at shining. So if there are certain activities that happen in the interview process, for instance, there is a challenge that each candidate has to perform, the HR team wants to cross all the T's and dot the I's to say, yes, everybody did it and we picked the best candidate, so that there could be no question as to discrimination or favoritism if certain candidates do not pass the muster. So that does happen, and I have not really looked into detail in terms of kind of financial compensation, how things change when you are a contract employee versus a full-time employee. But as I said earlier, typically a full-time employee, if we look at their base salary and just convert it to hourly rate, their hourly rate would be lower than what you get paid hourly, because you're getting all the additional benefits and the company is paying some of your employment taxes directly to the government.
Thank you. That's really good information.
Cool. Anything else? If nothing else, you can go start reading all those articles, because there's a lot to look through.
I guess I have another question. Could you maybe just briefly, I was looking at the bands, like the different tiers of salaries.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, could you maybe just explain how it was a little bit difficult for me to understand the two charts. Do they go hand in hand, or are they two different charts?
No, they do go hand in hand. And yes, I agree that they're a little bit confusing, especially if this is the very first time you're seeing. And unfortunately, I cannot point with let's see. Yes, I can point with a mouse here. So the pay grade, I have no idea why they're numbered the way that they are. But basically, let's say this is design team. And so, junior designer, senior designer, lead designer, design manager. Like, the company determines that each of these denominations is a specific type of role within the design team. And so as a junior designer, your salary would fall in this range. So this is the minimum. This is the maximum that you can get paid as a base salary of this company. And the companies also kind of look at what is the midpoint, and they tend to target hiring people at a midpoint or a little bit under, so that they can continue to move them and increase their salary within this range. When you become a senior designer, let's say that's what's the O2 that's represented here, your salary would shift into this higher band. So technically you can get paid overall more when you are in that role, right? Because the max value now has shifted to 39,000 from 35,000 plus. But if you, again, are in this, you are a junior designer promoted to a senior designer, let's say you're making 30,000, right? 30,000 falls within this range, but 30,000 also falls within the range of a senior designer as a base salary. So that is why I kept saying being promoted, which means your salary, your title is adjusted, does not always mean that your salary is adjusted, because both of those salaries fall within the two bands.
Got it.
And, somebody in management, for instance, their absolute lowest salary in the lowest level position would be at 40,000 and goes all the way up to whatever is here that I can't see. There we go, to 68,000. And then when you're promoted to a higher level manager position, let's say you're getting paid 50,000, right? You can get paid 50,000 as the first level manager, as well as you can continue to get paid 50,000 even when you're promoted to a more senior position, M2, because that 50 is still part of the salary band.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
Realize how important the starting salary is, because as you rise, if your starting salary is in the minimum range, then you can only rise within that range, especially if the percentage of increase is like 3 or 5% of your base salary. If you start low, you're going to rise low as well.
Yes, exactly. And that is what contributes to the kind of the amount of money that we tend to leave on the table over our 40 years of earning power. Yeah, so it's important to negotiate. But again, also do keep in mind that when a company makes an offer, if the market is full of super qualified candidates and the company can pick and choose and they have no motivation to hire you at a higher salary, they might start with you being kind of in the 25th percentile. And if you as a candidate are in a position where you're like, you know what, I've been on the job market for 3, 4, 6 months, I'm going to expand my range and I'm going to lower my minimum expectation, like you might be in a position where you take that. But that said, if you feel like you are underpaid for your skills and for what you perform and for the role that you're doing, and the economy changes and there are opportunities that are exciting for you, the biggest adjustment to your salary will be when you change jobs. Could be. So I shouldn't say that it will always be. If the company really values you and the company is structured in a way that they can support your career growth and financial compensation to match that, the company may be able to make adjustments and kind of increase your salary more significantly. But if you are within a large bureaucratic company that has, HR policies and guidelines, et cetera, that might be less likely to happen. So like a smaller company or a startup might be like, you know what, you're so awesome, we'll update your compensation. They have less red tape.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
How will salaries be negotiated? From my example, for example, I just finished a UX UI course, so I have a certificate, but I'm currently doing a career change. I do have 8 years experience as an architect, so there's some skills that can actually be transferred. So I would be applying as a junior designer. Would I be seen as like the lowest tier, or because based on my experience, work experience, I could be placed, my salary would be a little bit higher? Like how's it viewed?
Yeah, so I would say that typically determines on the job posting. So if a company is hiring for a junior designer and that's the position you're applying for, the company treats that as you are okay with the junior designer position, right? Through the interview process and through a recruitment conversation, like with the HR personnel, you could say, you know what, I applied for a junior position because I'm just really excited to join your company. I'm really interested in, like, you do a lot of great things. Like, are there any more senior positions? And would you consider me for anything more senior? So that's kind of where you could bring up your skills and have a conversation as to whether you would fit and be approved for hire at a higher level position. Again, large companies and HR teams that kind of begin the recruitment process, and when the hiring manager gets involved very late in the hiring process, they may not need to or want to make those adjustments. And I feel like those kind of conversations can happen more easily at smaller companies because they're more interested in just getting the right people to do the work, right? They don't have so much red tape. I've had candidates that applied for a user researcher position, and they were like 20 years of director level experience doing UX. And it's like, what are you doing applying here? Like, just does not compute. But that person wanted to have a conversation and get their foot in the door. And very early on in the phone call with the recruiter, he said, I'm not interested in this. I want to do something else. So we did not hire that person, but at least we had a conversation as to what they could bring to the table if and when we needed that kind of role. Yeah, but the short answer is the job posting and has a kind of a corresponding expected salary band with it. And the job posting has a title.
Thank you.
Yeah, and even if you're really qualified, the company simply may not have planned for, hiring somebody at a more senior level, and they just, even if you're really great, they could be like, we didn't plan for this expense for this year. Because again, they have the 25 to 40% extra things that they have to account for. So it may have nothing to do with you. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If a recruiter makes an offer that's a contract to hire position, is there
Mhm.
anything that you need to have in the contracts? Does that mean anything? Or is that just kind of like, I don't know, they could hire you or not hire you at the end? I don't know. What does that mean?
Yeah, so contract to hire means that if you work and you meet expectations and performance, etc., they can extend you a full-time offer. So I've heard about such arrangements. One of the things that I would ask to see in the offer letter is, when is the performance evaluated? Who evaluates the performance? Are there any kind of weekly check-ins to make sure that performance is on track? Right? Because if you make that investment and you're like, okay, I'm going to go work for you and I expect you to hire me within a year, how do I know and how can I correct my performance to meet your expectations? So some of those items may not make it into the offer letter, but they should definitely be discussed, right? To show that you are interested and you want to know exactly how that process goes. I would also ask things like, how often do you contract to hire people? Like how many employees, like what portion of employees have actually become full-time employees? Why did 50% of them not end up being, full-time employees? Maybe people realize they don't want to be at the company and they kind of drop off the radar. But just asking some of those kind of questions will help you be more informed.
I think it's also the type of company that it is. Some companies don't hire direct. They always do contract to hire because it's easier to fire a contractor than a full-time employee. And a lot of large corporations like EIG would do contract to hire because they want to test you out. And generally, in my experience, the contract to hire is around 6 months because they have understood that you're fully onboarded, and then they'll extend you a full-time offer. That's what I've seen. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, the contract piece means that the company doesn't pay some of your benefits and taxes, so financial planning, all of that good stuff. They just have enough time to figure out where they're going to find the cash, if they decide to hire somebody on. Yeah, because employees become an recurring expense. So what is the one thing that we absolutely have to always, always, always do?
Negotiate.
Good job. Yeah. So questions are not pouring in, and it's late and maybe some of you haven't even had dinner. I was quickly shoving my dinner into my mouth before the call. So I, again, want to thank you for inviting me to share with you some of my perspectives and experiences. If you have any questions that come up at any point as you're going through your experience, interviewing or just dealing with a situation at work, feel free to message me on Slack. I'm on the Hexagon UX Slack. You can find me there. You can find me on LinkedIn, connect with me. I'd be happy to share some of the perspectives because I do feel like we make our lives better and we make the lives of other women and our daughters and sisters and other people around us better when we ask for fair compensation.